So hi everyone, to everyone that's connecting from Rome, Spain, France, everywhere. So I'm in Spain. Joshua Williams, our speaker today. He's in New York, or New Jersey, Joshua. And so the webinar today is what do customers really want? So while everyone keeps connecting, oh hi from Portugal, Uruguay, hi everyone. We just wanted to recommend that you log in from Chrome. That's the best web browser to do this webinar. For some reason, it works better than other browsers. And I also wanted to recommend, so if you have any questions during the webinar, you can always ask them from the questions tab on your left. So below the screen where you see me and Joshua on the presentation, you have questions, polls, and offers, and you can just ask the questions directly from there so that they don't get lost in the chat. So hey, Italy, Porto, Lisbon, hey. So good to see everyone. All right, so I think in order to start on time, I'm just going to present our speaker today, and then he's going to do his presentation. And then in the end, I will be talking a bit about ISEM Fashion Business School, who we are, what we do, all the activities that we're doing. So hope everyone is safe. You know, we have a terrible situation with the coronavirus. I hope you're staying home and that everyone is in good health. We're doing this to keep everyone entertained and, you know, keeping positive that we're going to get through this and, you know, eventually life will get back to normal, and we need to also be thinking about strategy for the future and everything. So we have Joshua Williams here with us today. Joshua is an experienced creative director, consultant, educator, and overall personality. He actually started his career in theater before bridging into fashion. He's worked in the industry in many places, including J. McLaughlin, where he was director of corporate branding and online retailing. His specialties include fashion retail branding, advertising, interactive content development, e-commerce, and social media. And Joshua was an adjunct professor at the Fashion Institute of Technology, or FIT, in New York since 2008, where he was responsible for 3 graduate-level courses for the global fashion management and fashion design programs. He's also taught and developed new courses and programs at Berkeley College, where he was also chair of fashion merchandising and management. Also at LIM, Parsons, the New School, and ISEM, us, of course, as well. So he's currently an assistant professor at Parsons School of Design. He's the associate director of the Fashion Management MPS graduate program and also responsible for the online program. He is also the founder and active partner at Fashion Consort, a high-level consulting agency that specializes in integrative brand and business building, operational and systems development, and strategic consumer engagement. So he has a really great background in fashion, and he's an expert in all of this, and he, especially in what customers really want, which is the, oh, you can hear me? I see people that can hear me. If Emanuele and Elena, you can also, if you can reconnect from Chrome, that would be great. That's the best way to connect. Okay, so I will let Joshua take it from here. Can you guys hear Joshua? No. Okay. Joshua, maybe hit your microphone mute and unmute it again. It's okay. This happens all the time. We'll just... Can you hear him? No, still no. Okay. Now. Yes. Okay. Perfect. This happens every webinar. Yeah.
Classes online, so it's been a busy week, but I'm really glad to be here with you. I was actually working on a major presentation for the executives at Macy's about 2 months ago. And unfortunately, Macy's has closed due to the coronavirus. And in fact, I don't know if you've seen the news, but they furloughed almost all 125,000 of their employees. So needless to say, we never were able to provide this presentation. And so what I wanted to do today is maybe share some of the highlights that I was going to share with the executives at Macy's about retailing, and really thinking about how what customers want and how customer expectations have changed. So I have a lot to go through, and I know we have a short amount of time. So what I'm thinking is that I'll go through the information fairly quickly. And then as you have questions, maybe you can ask those down below. And then we can go to those towards the end. That way we can make sure that we answer any questions that you may have. Of course, if you can't hear or there's a problem, make sure you chat on the side, and Leo and the gang will help you out. So let me go ahead and turn on.
I will play and interrupt you only for like relevant questions to your slides. And then
Wonderful.
if not, we can.
Okay. So let's see if this works. I'm going to go ahead and switch to
the presentation.
my power. Yeah. So let's see here. Okay. All right. So here we are. I have to say, I've done this before, but it's always a little weird to know that there's 300 people out there watching you and you can't see any of them. So hopefully this feels as personal as it feels to me sitting in my home office here in New Jersey. So my topic today is really, what do customers want? And I want to talk a little bit about, we're going to look at it from a couple different perspectives. The first thing is that, retail has gone really completely upside down. I shot this picture in London actually in August, and I loved it because you have the feet there sort of sticking out, and it just sort of captured exactly what I think is happening in retail. Everything that we know about retail has changed. But what's really interesting is that the components and elements of retail have really stayed the same. In other words, all of the tools that we have are still the same that we've had for over 100 years, plus new technologies and new tools. But the way that we use them, the way that we interact with customers, the way that we present an experience to customers has definitely changed. So retailers really have to think about how to use these tools more efficiently, and how they have to consider how they're going to continue to morph and be fluid, because the reality is that expectations are constantly changing. We live in a really hyper speed world. And I think for most of us now sitting at home and working, it's probably very difficult because we're so used to going, being really connected to the world at all times. And I do hope that this is actually a chance for us to sort of sit back and kind of think about what we can do to sort of reset fashion retail, because we're certainly in need of that. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. So retail, first and foremost, is a place where we transact, right? So where customers come in and they purchase a good from a retailer. And this can be digital or physical. And customers, of course, are going to retailers to buy things that they need. And they're also going to buy things that they want. But the interesting thing about retail is it's also a place to congregate and create communities. So remember that retail is a relatively new idea going back to about the mid-1800s. Before that, most people, especially if you were rich, had a tailor or a seamstress that would make your dress or your outfit specifically for you. It wasn't really until the mid-1860s when we started to create collections, Charles Frederick Worth being the first one, opening his atelier in Paris. But sort of the Industrial Revolution was also sort of changing how we lived. And we were starting to work in factories. We were moving from the farms into the cities. And so we started to have jobs that were sort of 9 to 5. And not only that, because of the factories, we were able to mass produce clothing. So when we had the ability to mass produce clothing, we also needed the ability to mass sell that same clothing. And so stores like Macy's, Wanamaker's opened up in New York City, and around the world, different department stores would open up. And this was a chance to sell customers clothing, as well as other things. What's really interesting, though, is that most people didn't want to shop for clothes at retail stores. Why would you if you could have your clothes custom made and tailored specifically to your body? And if you were poor, you know, your mom probably made your clothes, and you also had them at least customized so they fit your body. So why would you go to a store and buy mass-produced clothes that didn't fit you perfectly? And so retailers at that time had to really think about what it is that people wanted, because they certainly weren't going to go to a store just to buy clothes. So it's really interesting if you take a look at some of these pictures here at the very top. This is considered one of the first department stores in America. It's Wanamaker's in Philadelphia. And if you notice there is a pipe organ. It happens to be the third largest pipe organ in the world. And the goal was to get people into this store to hear music. And across from that pipe organ where this picture is taken is a tea shop, and people would have tea and they would meet their friends and they would listen to music. So shopping was sort of secondary to that. So already retailers early on knew that they had to bring in people not just to shop, but really to experience something and to congregate. And I think that's a really key thing that we have to think about today. And just as a kind of point, if you think about Galeries Lafayette in Paris, it is sort of a temple to retail, really. It's beautiful stained glass. It's really built sort of to be very religious, very ritualistic. So something to keep in mind. All right. So retailers are service and product providers, okay? And I think this is particularly the case in fashion. We are not just going to buy a product when we buy fashion. We are really there to be served. Now, this can be at all different levels. So it could be at the level of an H&M or a Zara, where we want to be able to get in and sort of do our own thing. But it also could be at the level of Prada, where we do expect some more attention from the sales associates. But what's really interesting is that over the past, let's say 10 years, service has gone from being about white glove, sort of overwrought services where you're taking your time, to something that's very easy and quick. I remember hearing from the CEO of Nordstrom, Pete Nordstrom, about how they had to completely shift their idea of what luxury meant for their customer. Luxury wasn't about spending time in the store and having champagne. Luxury was being able to go in, being able to find exactly what you want, and be able to get out of there as quick as possible. And this is really interesting, right? And this is driven in large part by technology. All right, so what's really interesting now, kind of the buzzword in retail, is experience. But I want to be clear that I think it's a buzzword, and it's a good buzzword, but I also think that it's an overused buzzword, because it really needs to be connected to something more than just an experience. In other words, if you throw a big event and you have a DJ and everyone comes, okay, it might be a great event, but that's not necessarily going to get people to come back to your store. There has to be something more. So in my opinion, experience has to be very connected to a company's clear core values. And those core values will help to create community. That's key. So it's experience connected to values that creates community. It's that sense of community, again, this desire to congregate in a particular place, whether that's digitally like we are today, or that's in a physical form in a store, that becomes really, really important. So the experience itself doesn't have to be grand. It just needs to be thoughtful. So for example, I have a picture here of a coffee shop. This is a place where a lot of people congregate, not only in terms of having coffee, but we also go there to work, sometimes to take a phone call, sometimes to meet friends. And I think that's really key in understanding how we want to think about retail, because it's a place where we go and it's part of our community. It's part of our daily ritual. On the bottom there, you see a restaurant that's at Selfridges, and it's interesting. You can't see from this picture, but it's right in the middle of the resort collections. So as you're having your lunch, you're literally right next to the clothes. And I think this is also really important, because I think a lot of retailers are opening restaurants in their stores, but they're separated from the actual shopping. And I think Selfridges does a really great job of thinking about how to connect those two things. All right, so I want you to just think for a second, and obviously we're all on mute, so this is not going to be a conversation, but I want you to think quickly about your favorite retailer and ask yourself, what are they doing to create and facilitate community? And if you want to, go ahead and jot that down, because we'll come back to that a little bit later. So what does your favorite retailer currently do that creates community? Okay, so think about it from terms of experience, the ease of shopping, perhaps the products that they sell. All right. So while you're thinking about that, I want to talk a little bit about the customer and how the customer is changing. We hear all the time about millennials and Gen Z. Just a quick reminder here, millennials are now age 40, so they are no longer young. They are no longer the up and coming generation. They are here. They are our core sort of customer when it comes to retail. And it's very much about thinking about Gen Z, which is sort of the next group that's coming forward. But we'll look at both. So while online retail is growing quickly, it represents a fairly small percentage of total sales. Okay, and it's typically about 10 to 15% on average. Now, some retailers, it's much different, but that's sort of a general a breakdown. So it's about, let's say, 88% of sales are done in brick and mortar, 12% of sales are done online. Now, that's pretty significant. So I do point out that e-commerce really got started, I want to say late 90s, but we really started to see it go across all different levels of the fashion industry in about 2005, 2006, 2007. It's about the same time that the Apple iPhone comes out. So if you think about that, that means in about 15 years, we've shifted, at least 12 to 15% of our business into a brand new channel. And that's pretty amazing if you think about it. But what I want to point out here is that it's not so much about this is how many online sales are happening versus this is what's happening in brick and mortar. The reality is that about 65% of sales are involving all channels, meaning you might go online and look at something, right? And you might even put it in the cart and might even do research about it, even though you still might go buy it in the store. And so this really gets us into this concept of omni-channel retailing. So 65% of sales, right, involve more than one channel. So brands have to think about the total customer user experience. They can't just think about it as the person who goes to the store or the person who goes online. You can't just think about it either in terms of buy it online and pick up in store either, although that might be one way to think about an omni-channel approach. Another thing I just want to kind of point out, just to put this into perspective, I was on another webinar the other day, and I noticed that they mentioned that about 35% of all sales online are returned, okay? And almost all of that is returned to a physical store or it ends up in a physical place. And so even though, we're talking about 10 to 15% of sales happening online, the effect on the overall business, right, both the brick and mortar and the digital business is quite big in terms of what those returns reflect. So one of the key things here that I want to point out is that it's not so much that omni-channel is the biggest channel and that we should all just go online and forget about brick and mortar. In fact, I think that's not the good thing to do. But e-commerce has completely changed our expectations, right? So the fact that we now shop online, that we can see product, that we can do it at 11 o'clock at night, we don't even have to be dressed. We're all getting used to that now, right? That we don't even have to dress up anymore. But all of that has kind of changed our relationship with shopping. That means that our customer has changed dramatically since, even the last 20 years. And most customers really think of shopping online as a personal experience. So when you ask them questions or survey, they typically will say, we love shopping online because it's so personal and it's so easy. Now, what's really interesting from that is that actually it typically takes longer to shop online. So if you see something in a window as you're walking down the street and it catches your attention and you walk into the store, there's a likelihood if that item fits you or something in that store fits you, that you can walk out of the store in 20 to 30 minutes with something in your bag, something that you didn't even want 20 minutes before. But online, it takes more like 36 hours to purchase it. So that we're talking over a day to make that decision. It's not so much that it's easier. It's just that we now have more access to a lot more comparison shopping. We look for different prices. We look at different colors. We consider different brands in a way that we've never done before. The other thing too is that this idea of shopping online is more psychological than anything else because we're kind of doing it on our own terms. In other words, we don't have to dress up. We don't have to talk to a store associate. We can kind of do it the way that we want to. So what does this all mean? It really means that if that's what customers feel is personal, how then do we think about that in a brick and mortar store, in a physical store? Right? What does that mean? How does that relationship change now between the customer and the sales associate that's different than 20 years ago when we didn't have online? Okay. So one of the things that I would recommend thinking about is how do we facilitate online sales in stores? How do we facilitate online purchases with pickup? What about thinking about Uber Eats in terms of retail? In other words, delivery, same day delivery, being able to try on at home and send it back, which is something that Net-a-Porter does. And also, thinking about restaurants in particular, how they're adapting to sort of this new world, because retail in many ways is going to have to do the same thing and is certainly going through that process now. So I want you to meet Jane. She's 30 years old and she lives in a large city, and she's your typical 30-year-old, right? And I'm not going to go into all of this today, but she probably has a decent job. She probably has an apartment, maybe lives with a friend, and she likes to go to work. She likes to do yoga after. She might get a drink with friends. So those are your typical demographics, psychographics of a woman who's 30 living in a large city, right? So then I want you to meet Jane. She's 30 and she lives in the suburbs. It's the same person. She has the same demographics, right? She has the same job and she has the same likes. She has the same friends. It's just that she lives in the suburbs. So what does that change? This is something that a lot of retailers are not very good at, because they're really typically looking at what we call sort of a full expanse of the demographic psychographic profile. And they're trying to develop a business that essentially meets them at the middle. What we're learning with e-commerce or online or technology is that customers actually expect to be engaged one-on-one. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. And that we expect retailers to take care of our problems, whether we live in a city or we live in a suburb. So Jane in the suburb, even though she has the same job and all that, she might be married at this point, and she might even have a child. Even if she doesn't, she's driving a car. She's driving to a store. So when she goes shopping, she actually has to plan ahead and think about, okay, I want to drive to this store. I'm going to park here. I'm going to go shop here, and then I'm going to go to the next place. Whereas in a city, you might pop into a department store, and then you might pop into the boutique next door, and it might be a lot more fluid. So retailers have to think about the user experience differently than they ever have before. And this is just one example. What I have my students do a lot is write a full customer bio. And this covers everything from how this customer wakes up in the morning, what she eats, how she walks to her coffee shop if she has earphones in, what she's listening to, what kind of coffee does she get, does she bring an extra bag to go to yoga in, what kind of shoes does she wear on her way to work, does she wear the same shoes at work? All of these questions, because they become important in terms of how a retailer is going to engage a consumer. So as a quick example, I live just outside of Manhattan. I'm 13 miles away, actually. And my life, even though I work in Manhattan, is quite different when I'm in New Jersey than it is in New York, right? So we're only talking, in this case, 15 miles difference, right? So about 20 kilometers. And there's a huge difference in terms of how I shop in New Jersey versus how I shop in New York City. So obviously we won't discuss these, but these are some questions to think about. So what are the key user experience traits of a retail's customers? So this idea of UX is so important. Really truly understanding what the user experience is, not just in the store, but throughout the day. We call those touch points, right? What are the different touch points, and how can a retailer or a brand touch the customer throughout the day? And of course, we also know that that's 24 hours at this point, right? How does location change the user experience of a retailer's customer? So city dweller, suburb, country, all of those kinds of questions. Does a retailer serve all customers, and can they? So this is a really interesting question, because back in the day, the idea of a Macy's or a Galerie Lafayette or department stores in general was to serve everyone. They had something for everyone. And the reality is that the retailers who seem to be doing the best right now are those who only serve a very small niche. So you take somebody like Everlane or Proper Cloth, and they're very, very hyper-focused on a very particular customer, right? So it's not to say one is right and one is wrong. I think it's just something that we have to question and we have to consider. One quick example of this is the Amazon, which of course is now, I think it's the second largest after Alibaba. But Amazon is famous because, of course, it created an online bookstore and then turned that into a massive retail operation. What's really interesting about Amazon is that they're not so much a retailer as they are a logistics company. They truly understand how to leverage logistics, no matter what it is they're selling, whether it's fashion, books, or vacuum cleaners. They know how to leverage that in a way that is generalized across the whole country, okay, but also very focused on a local customer. So Amazon Books, this one happens to be on 34th Street in New York City, right in Midtown Manhattan. And what's really fascinating about this store is that they use the data and the analytics from their online operation to determine exactly what people want on that block in that specific neighborhood in Manhattan. And if you've ever been there, it's kind of amazing. It's the first time I've ever walked into a bookstore, other than maybe a little neighborhood bookstore, and completely felt like every book in there I wanted to read. And of course, this isn't too far off, because Amazon's been using the data to figure out exactly what people are reading in that area. Another little point that they do is, instead of having reviews from the major newspapers, they have customer reviews, because we do know that one of the changes due to online retailing is that customers actually trust other customers more so than they do experts. It's one of the reasons why social media has done so well, is because in a way it's leveled the playing field in terms of voice, right? So even though we might follow the Kardashians and those sort of bigger celebrities, where the power of social media is in sort of what we call the local celebrity, the person who lives in our area that we're closer to them. In other words, we can have their life too. And so we are able to look at what they're doing, what restaurants they're going to, what stores they're shopping at, what they're buying. And it's actually something that we can do because they live and work and breathe in the same environment that we do. So customers really ultimately want flexibility and ease. And this is something that I mentioned earlier. So retailers sell product and service, and that service, it's really key here, has to be easy to access. All right. So this graph comes from Google. It's a few years old, but I think it gets its point across in the sense that there's all sorts of different processes that we follow when shopping. And if brands are not aware of this, if they're not really thinking about all these different touch points, they're going to lose that customer somewhere in that chain. And that's really important to understand. It's not just about getting somebody into a store and shopping. You literally have to be available to these shoppers at all times in all different ways so that you can get the sell. Because if you don't, there's hundreds of thousands, literally, of other retailers selling the same type of product, okay? If anything, we're completely oversaturated now with retailers. Last I heard, we have approximately 60 square feet of retail space for every single person in the United States. That's crazy, right? If you think about that. So we have too much product. One of the things that I think might start to change is with the coronavirus is that a lot of these companies are simply not going to make it. And it might be a chance to sort of cut through a lot of, the clutter in fashion, but we'll talk about that in a second later. All right, so I want to move on. So what are some of the customer pain points that we hear about? I've just made a list of them, and there's obviously a lot more than this. These are ones that we hear quite often. Lack of time, which is very interesting. The reality is that technology was supposed to make our lives easier, but we find, in fact, that it's made it easier, so we do more. And so one of the things we hear a lot from customers is they just don't have time, and that speed is so important in terms of being able to find product, buy product, and have product shipped and returned. Location, obviously, too many options. We hear this a lot, especially with larger retailers. It's very rare that a Gen Z or millennial customer is going to go above a second floor. So department stores like El Corte Inglés that has 5 or 6 stories, it's getting harder and harder to get people up onto those floors. And this is something I know that Macy's is struggling with currently because they have, I think it's 7 floors. Finding the right size.
Joshua.
Yes.
So speaking of Gen Z, we have a question that I think could be relevant here.
Sure.
They ask, Dunia asks, which are the best retailer examples focusing on Gen Z? Like,
you know what? I'll get into that in a little bit. I have a couple of examples, but Gen Z tend to focus on companies that are hyper authentic to certain values and that are very specific in what they sell. So I'll kind of leave that there, and then I'll come back with a couple of examples that I think show that. I also see another question from Maria Perez Prat, and I think it's a good question to answer. You're asking about local clients not having the same likes as online retail. Interestingly enough, what we know from the data is that most customers tend to shop their local stores online. So let me say that again. We typically buy at the same stores we shop at in person. We all have the opportunity. From New York, I could shop brands in Spain. I could shop brands in Paris, but I don't. I typically shop the retailers where I might find a Parisian brand or a Spanish brand, but I'm going to still maybe go to Saks Fifth Avenue to buy that product, or I might go to Rent the Runway to rent, that French product. But I still typically go to the same places that I shop locally. And that's a really important thing, is that I think a lot of online retailers thought if they open up, they're basically available to the world. That's not true. One of the things that Net-a-Porter did really, really well is that they decided when they opened their store, they were only going to open in one city at a time, and that they were going to essentially open in each city very thoughtfully and very specifically to those clients to make sure that they were solving the problems of product, right? Product for the local location, and ease, the ability to get it quickly. And in New York, you can get it the same day and return it that same day. So, so that was a very, one of the reasons why Net-a-Porter managed to get through the clutter in terms of luxury online retailing is because they were so localized.
Right.
All right. So I want to move to a couple of examples, and I hope this sort of helps to create some ideas, thoughts about what retailers can do. One of the things that I've seen a lot with retailers is they tend to latch onto things. So they might see in the data that, oh, Gen Z loves music, right? Great. So what does that mean? It means we're going to have a DJ in our store. Yay. Here's the problem. Okay. First of all, that DJ on a Saturday morning, there's no Gen Z that I know that woke up and went to Macy's, a department store, at 9 o'clock on a Saturday, right? So two, a Gen Z, as they're walking into the store, probably have their headphones on with their own favorite music. The last thing they want to do is hear some DJ playing on top of the music that they're listening to in their earphones. Three, like I said, those Gen Z people are probably not at Macy's in the morning on Saturday. It's probably their parents, the baby boomers. And those baby boomers don't want to hear loud DJ music at 9 o'clock in the morning while they're just trying to enjoy their Starbucks coffee as they kind of get their day started. So my point here is that, yes, we do know that Gen Zs connect with music very strongly. And we do know that that's a psychographic trait. But the idea of simply putting a DJ in the store in order to connect with Gen Z or even millennials is a bit wrong-headed. I'll give you a couple of other examples. This is a good example of Selfridges in London. This is a picture I took while I was there in August. This is the Depop vintage store, and it's right in the middle of the new and contemporary brands, which I think is very interesting. The idea being here that you're mixing both local and vintage with new design and sort of brand, international brand names that are very much focused on a younger consumer. One of the areas that we know that Gen Z are really driving towards is vintage. They love vintage. They tend to buy used. And Selfridges is doing a really great job of connecting the dots between vintage and new. And one of the great things about vintage is that it tends to be more localized. So that means that from a sustainability perspective, or at least from a values perspective, younger customers feel like they're shopping both local and international. So I already talked about the earphones, and I have a couple of these thoughts here, just questions to think about. So if people are walking into stores with headphones in, is that a nuisance or is that an opportunity? What do I mean by that, right? So in my mind, if you're going to blast music in your store, or you're going to have a sales associate that tries to talk to you when you're walking into the door and you have to pull your headphones out, that might be a nuisance. So, and that's not going to go away. That's how, we walk around with our headphones, and especially if we live in the city. So how can stores use those headphones in order to connect with us in a more authentic way? I'm not saying that this is exactly the right example, but perhaps it's having some sort of voice activation when you walk in that says, welcome to Uniqlo. And that's it. If you need any help, press 1 on your phone and we're happy to help. It's that simple, right? So stores really need to think about, okay, instead of trying to fight against the headphones, how do we use them in a way that might help to connect with the customer? Another example would be social media. A lot of companies or retailers are now adding social media into their stores. And this is after a long time of pushing back, because stores typically don't like customers taking pictures in their store. But the reality is that they now have to allow that, and not only allow it, but they have to help facilitate it. But this can be kind of annoying if it feels like they're just pandering to you, like, hey, post this on Pinterest, like I have here. I don't know that especially a Gen Z customer is going to go in there and look and say, oh, okay, I'm going to post that on Pinterest. What I do think, though, is that stores that actually set up zones in their store where you can try something on and your friend can take a picture of you with great lighting, and then you can post it wherever you want to, that might be the opportunity. Or thinking about lighting, for example, in a different way than just environmental feeling, but also lighting in terms of how does it look in a photograph, right? And also thinking about the fact that people might literally be coming into your store to just photograph things, and then they might buy online. Here's another one, having sort of all of these like technological, screens everywhere. A lot of retailers did this, and I found them annoying because it took me 5 minutes just to figure out how to use them. And then there are people waiting behind me. And also, I don't know about you guys, but every time I see screens or people together on TV shows, I think, oh my God, six feet away, you have, coronavirus. And I have a feeling that these kinds of things, we might have to rethink a bit, how we touch in public spaces. So again, it's maybe a lot of what we're doing right now is more pandering to what we think millennials and Gen Z want. And I think stores need to think a little bit more about what they're actually doing. So let's talk about this Gen Z a little bit, because this is a question that's come up. Is we know that customers have pain points. So then why are millennials, earlier millennials and late Gen Zs willing to stand in line at Supreme or literally camp out, right? Why are Gen Z customers literally willing to pay $50 to go shop in a store? I mean, I'm just talking just for going into a store. Why are we all willing to shop online and wait 3 days for delivery? And why are we willing to spend more on a limited edition piece? And by that, I mean a lock that you can buy for $1.50 with Supreme on it, and now it's $20 or $100, right? So one of the things that we have to think about is that just because they're a pain point doesn't mean that we can't use those as a way to think differently or to provide a unique experience. And so a couple of examples here, I'm going to skip here a little bit, are just really thinking about what makes you unique and why you can connect. So this one happens to be for not millennials, more for Gen X and baby boomers. But this was a hotel company that decided that the biggest pain point for customers was the pillow size. So they offered 8 to 9 pillows on every bed in every shape and every type of comfort level. And they called them the heavenly pillows. And this became a point of difference for the hotel. And somebody who travels a lot, this was amazing because I finally could sleep at night when I was at this hotel, and because I had the perfect pillow. But wouldn't you believe it that at the minute that that company offered the pillows, then all the other hotel companies decided that they needed to offer the same thing. So that point of parity or difference became a point of parity. This is a very, very small thing, but I wanted to kind of point out here that even though you might sell products on a large scale, thinking very specifically about a pain point and then offering that in a unique way is something that will connect with customers. Everlane is very popular, especially with younger millennials, so people in their 20s and 30s. It's a pretty basic store. There's not a lot of product. But the product there is of a very particular type and a quality, and it's very connected to values of sustainability. And people line up, in New York City, blocks in order to shop this store. A lot of retail companies I know are shaking their heads and going, but we have so many great products and their products are so boring, we don't understand. But that's not the right question. The question is what very specific thing is Everlane doing that creates connection around community and values? I'm going to skip here. Well, actually, let me just talk for a second about this. One of the things that I'm seeing a lot with retailers, and you're seeing this on I've been watching a lot of Netflix lately, obviously, and a lot of restaurant shows. And one of the trends that I'm seeing in this, and I like to look at trends in all different verticals, is that because we're so able to travel, both physically, meaning we can go to different countries very easily, but also digitally through Instagram and Pinterest and through pictures and things. There's no longer the need to have sort of an international flair for your restaurant, for example, or for your store. In other words, that you're catering to everyone. A lot of the trend I'm seeing is this idea of a restaurant being very, very true to their local environment. So if you're in Switzerland, for example, you want to ensure that there's Swiss food on the menu and that there's local farmers that are part of that. This same thing is true in retail. The biggest customers at Macy's in New York City, interestingly enough, are not New Yorkers. It's international customers, right? And I know that's a big pain point for Macy's. It's why are New Yorkers not shopping at Macy's? Why is it tourists shopping at Macy's? What are we doing wrong in that sense? Airbnb, they launched very specifically with apartments for rent. And now a big part of their business is, you can see up there, experiences and adventures. Again, these are very connected to core values of exploration and going out and living in the world, but they're also about creating community. These are about meeting people when you travel and connecting with people. So it's much more than just an apartment, something I think that retailers should consider. Going back to hotels, for example, Marriott now basically owns almost all the hotels in the United States, but they've done a really good job in thinking about the different levels and experiences. So it's all Marriott. Every one of those hotels, right, from the Ritz-Carlton and the W Hotel all the way down to the bottom, are all Marriott hotels. And yet the experience in each of those hotels is very different and very localized. Again, having traveled a lot, you know, the Ritz-Carlton in Paris is different than the Ritz-Carlton in New York, except for the service and expectations, right? So there's also not only just differences in terms of the level of brand that we're offering, but also in terms of the localization. And I think that's also important. So localization, authentic flavors, these are all really important key things right now for retailers to consider. And here's just a couple of examples. So I know I'm kind of hitting the end here a little bit, so I'm going to just kind of move through these quickly. Pop-up stores have gotten more and more popular in large part because they attract Gen Z and millennials because they pop up for a while and then they disappear. They don't try too hard. They're available when they have a meaning, when they have a reason to be available. And there's an authenticity to that. A company that I work for, J. McLaughlin, it's a very sort of preppy brand, you know, typically prices from $200 to $1,000. But you can see that each of these stores, whether it's upstate New York and Horse Country, Georgetown on the top right, which is Washington, D.C., or Palm Beach, they're all the same company, but they all have, and they all look and feel and serve the same way, but they all have a very unique point of view. Liberty of London, one of my favorites. I think this is a good point. I love this title. I happened to see this in the Standard the other day. Is Liberty a department store or a dating agency? And they're referring to on the top floor, there's this wonderful place where you can get all sorts of yarns, and they also have knitting classes. So people go there to not only shop and buy the yarns, but to also learn how to make things. And ultimately, that's where they meet people and I guess date. But anyway, that's all about creating community. The other piece that customers want, especially Gen Z, millennials, is a personal touch. They want to feel like they know the people they're engaging with. It's one of the reasons why coffee shops are so popular, because it's the barista that they know. So stores have to think about how to create those personal connections, whether it's concierge services or tailoring or a more thoughtful sales staff. A couple of examples here on one-on-one, Proper Cloth, making shirts for men, very customized shirts, typically around $100. So you get a fully customized Italian made shirt, but it's very specific to you. This was created by Seth Scarrett, who's an engineer, not even in fashion. Ultimately, when you're solving a problem for a customer, right, that's where you get loyalty. In fact, there's a bit of an idea in marketing that if you create a problem and then solve it, you actually end up with a better loyal customer. If your customer always has a decent experience but never has to actually really engage with you, they're probably never going to be loyal. So I think that's a key thing here. So I want to move this here to, I'm going to skip. I know I'm at the end here.
Sorry, Joshua, before you move on,
yeah,
there was a question about if you think the make-to-order business could be the business model of the future.
Which one?
It's a question from Luca. Could the make-to-order be the business model of the future, like what you just talked about?
I missed the brand name that you said again because you went out.
No, sorry. So like make-to-order businesses.
Oh,
so,
made to order.
Like those shirts. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big area. I think the problem is that it takes a lot of know-how to do that. So Seth Scarrett, when he created Proper Cloth, he came at it from an engineering point of view and really solved the problem. And he's managed to stay in business now for, I think he's going on 9 years. Other companies that have tried who don't have the wherewithal or maybe the technological background to build something like that have not fared as well. But that's sort of an interesting thing, right? So does a company like a Macy's, do they spend the money to start developing personalized services? Or do they leave that to somebody like Proper Cloth and do they hyper focus on what they do best?
Right.
Right.
Yeah, there was a company, Tinker Tailor,
Yes.
that was started by the founder of one of the founders of Modo Operandi. Yeah, and she also talked about like how that
Yeah.
could be in the future, but it didn't work out because they did it too early. But interesting to think about.
Well,
Sorry,
and
I'll
the
let you
question,
move on.
yeah, no, the question around COVID-19, right, is a big one because, so here's my personal opinion, since we're kind of here towards the end, is that I think a lot of retailers, especially department stores, were trying to do everything they could to connect with every possible customer. And that was possible in the era when you could determine the conversation through advertising and through marketing, and through, all the sort of traditional elements that we had. But when you have e-commerce and you have more than 1 trillion websites to choose from, right, it's a much different place. And when you have customers that are demanding a one-on-one experience, even if they understand that it's not exactly one-on-one, it's a mask personalization, as we like to call it, that's really changing how we do business. So the question really for me around COVID-19, besides the health issues and just sort of the real implications, the health implications and the deaths and things, is really what is retail going to do as they sort of restart? Because this is a chance for retailers in a way to start fresh. I mean, they really are wiped out at this point. And, what I'll be recommending as a consultant to a lot of these brands is, what is your unique selling proposition? What is it that makes you special? What is it that you do better than anyone else? That's where we have to start. And what I do hope is that a lot of the clutter will sort of kind of go away as companies start to focus on what it is they do best. In other words, and I hate to pick on Macy's a little bit, but does Macy's really have to do everything for everyone? No. I mean, I certainly don't shop there anymore because it's not for me. Zara, for example, how are they going to change? One of the things they've done very well is thought about this from a brand perspective. And instead of just having Zara, they have Pull and Bear, and they have, all these other brands that are hyper-focused. It's like that portfolio of hotels that we talked about earlier. So maybe that's the way, is thinking about one big brand umbrella, but also thinking about those more localized concepts. And by the way, I think this is going to happen in luxury as well. If anything, luxury is going to be very hard hit through this because, we're just, as people, we're kind of rethinking what matters and what we want to spend our money on. And right now we're really focused on our health and our personal lives and our family's health. And, having a $4,000 bag, maybe not so important right now. It's not to say that I don't think it will come back. It will. But it might take a little bit of time as we sort of rethink what luxuries are.
Right. Sorry,
So
and so while you're on COVID,
yeah.
there was another question. Vanner asked if you think people will totally move to e-commerce because of their habits have changed because of the lockdown.
Well, I'm going to answer it this way. Everyone has moved to e-commerce. Nobody doesn't use e-commerce. So that was my point early on, is that we're all using e-commerce 100%. The question is whether or not that's the end all be all. In other words, do we not end up going back to the store? Do other channels sort of disappear? And my answer to that in the long term is actually no, I don't think so. I think if anything, we are going to want to go back into public, and we're going to need community and connection in a physical way again that we've never, in a way that we didn't know. And I think that stores are going to have to rethink what that means. They already are. Even in their advertising, there's a fine balance between pandering to the pandemic versus sort of being part of the conversation and the support. So I've had a lot of conversations with some CEOs and executives about this, and they're all thinking about what is the new brick and mortar, because we think it's going to be more important than ever. But that said, I think online is going to be probably the key driver, as I have here on these takeaways, the key driver of that experience, no matter which channel you're shopping in. Are there other questions? I have these takeaways. I'm not going to go through them. Just some kind of key things to think about as we're sort of ending.
Yes, you have tons of questions down below in the questions tab.
Okay.
If I don't know if you're ending now, but you can if you want to start answering
let me answer a couple of questions. I know that, and I'm happy to go as long as need be. But so Alexa asked about the silver foxes and the baby boomers, the oldest age bracket. Actually, I think that because of online, we're actually paying attention to them more than we ever have before, because they are a niche customer with a lot of money. I was just watching TV the other day, and there was a commercial for underwear that featured women that were over 60, and they were in their underwear. And, I've never seen anything like that on television before, because here's the thing, maybe opening that and having it in every, shopping center doesn't make sense. But that doesn't mean that there's not millions of women who actually want underwear that fits their bodies as they've matured. And so having a few key brick and mortar stores plus an online presence, that's a real opportunity. So question about studying fashion. So I'm going to go ahead and put a pitch. I think, ISEM is a wonderful place to go. I teach there all the time. So if you're looking for something in Europe, I would recommend that, Leonore is going to talk about that a little later. If you're headed to New York, obviously I teach at Parsons in the graduate program, and would welcome, if you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, I can answer any questions you have about that. How is data collected from online channels shaping new ways of display in the physical environment? Wow, that's a big question. That's a whole lecture. It's not right now in a way that I think matters. I think other than Amazon, a lot of companies haven't quite figured out how to do this. The reality is that we have in our palm of our hand with our phone content that is actually shaping, quite literally, how I shop when I go shopping. Very rarely am I not on my phone when I'm in a physical shopping space. And yet retailers haven't figured out how to connect what I'm doing on my phone versus what I'm doing in the store. So I think that's a wide open area, and I know a lot of tech companies are thinking about that right now. Sustainability, is it really valued in the fashion industry? Okay, so I hope so. And actually, I think that this virus might sort of. So I think of sustainability not just in terms of the environment, but also in terms of fair wages, supply chain, access and sourcing, transparency, things like that. I do think that this virus is going to change that conversation dramatically, because I think we realize that as connected as we are globally, when something like this happens, it breaks down all of our systems. And so we have to start thinking a little bit more locally again. To answer the question a little bit more pointedly, I think that sustainability is very important in terms of values, but in terms of actually how people shop, we are not seeing that carry through. I'm hopeful that we're moving in that direction, but the reality is we talk a big game about sustainability, recycling, upcycling, all those things, and then we still go shop at Zara. I mean, my personal opinion is that fashion is not a sustainable industry. It just isn't. Not because we're not buying things typically that we need. We're buying things that we want, and until we, fully rethink that, from an economics point of view, I don't know that we're going to ever really truly be sustainable. And I would recommend reading Lee Edelcourt's work on this. She's talking a lot right now about this. Let's see. There's so many great questions. I'm just trying to look and see which ones I think I can answer the best. I think there's some questions just about what's happening right now in shopping online. I can speak for Americans. We're kind of moving into a space now where it's a little bit more difficult to get things that are beyond needs. So even Amazon is now focused more on essentials. It doesn't mean that you can't order other things, but everyone's kind of really focused on everything from toilet paper and soap and sanitizers and things like that. And that's really sort of the bigger conversation. That said, I think there's an opportunity for retailers to maybe take more of the Warby Parker model, where you can try things, have a little bit more time to try things on in your home and maybe send them back for free, something that Amazon does. again, kind of rethinking what that relationship is with the consumer, especially as they're stuck at home.
Oh, Joshua, before you
Yeah.
answer another one, they're asking for the author name for that book that you recommended. What book it is and
So
what author?
it's Lee Edelcourt, and she wrote a thing called Anti-Fashion. Thank you.
Perfect.
I just
Thanks.
posted it as well. She also did a really great talk on business of fashion that I'd recommend. Another little point I'd make, there was a great article in Business of Fashion about how brands are becoming religions for Gen Z, meaning that as people become more secular and less believing in organized religion, that they're looking for brands. I think the easy thing to do is go, oh my God, think what's happening to our society? And I think that's one part of this. But I think really what we're talking about here is that Gen Z, people in their, let's say, teens all the way up through their 30s, don't have the places to go where they connect with friends and colleagues that our parents had. And so we are looking potentially for brands to do that for us. And I think there is some opportunity. I think Patagonia is doing a great job. I think Lululemon does a decent job in this around yoga. I think Nike is kind of shifting, as is Adidas, towards more sports where you can go play a game of hoops. And also try on shoes, but it's really more about hanging out with your friends than it is shopping. So, those I think are key things to consider. So somebody asked about manufacturing your own products and what that plays in the future. So there's two competing things that I'm thinking about at a graduate level around innovation. The first thing is with 3D printing and such, there is the potential in the future that brands can essentially sell digital product, and then we'll have a printer in our home that can print that product. There's a lot of really interesting implications to that, especially the idea that we're getting close to being able to print real animal leather without the use of animals. So from a values perspective or a vegan perspective, that's quite interesting. And it also, from an IP perspective, it means that brands can actually create uniqueness in their textiles that can be protected in a way that fashion typically isn't. So that's one vein that I'm looking at. The second one is digital product. I had a woman speak in my class a couple of months ago, and her whole theory is that we're already into augmented reality using Instagram. So for example, when you put the little bunny ears on or you put the glasses on, virtually, that is augmented reality. And her theory is that we're going to move further and further in that space in terms of fashion, and that will actually become physicalized. So for example, you can pick your digital outfit, and actually that's what people see as they're walking through the day. It's not real. It's just it's the shield, the digital shield, so to speak, that we have on that people can see, and that we can adapt that and change that. And there's a lot of technologies right now that's pushing in that area that are really interesting. How are we doing on time? Are we okay, Leonore, if I answer a few more questions?
Yeah, you can ask. Yeah, you can answer a few more questions. Okay. And then.
I love the question about body positivity and women empowerment, and I would add, so one of the areas that I skipped through, one of the major things that retailers are grappling with are diversity and inclusivity. So what does that mean? It means body shape. It means gender. So women, men, trans, everything in between. So the LGBTQ space. It has to do with fit and size. So plus size versus our other standard sizings. It has to do with ethnicity. It has to do with language. It has to do with skin color. And I'm just going to put it out there. Most retailers are really shitty at doing this. And part of the reason why, again, goes back to this idea that brands had to sort of find their center and be everything to everyone as much as possible. That's very difficult, as I pointed out. But B, you're leaving out, basically in America, you're leaving out anyone who isn't white. So, and we're hitting a point in America where I think we're hitting a tipping point where more people will be speaking Spanish than English in this country. And we have a lot more ethnicity and diversity in ethnicity. And we certainly have had a major change culturally around issues of gender and sexuality. Stores cannot look the other way when it comes to this. And customers are most definitely looking for companies that are authentic to this space. So I was at a company, and I'll keep it unnamed, but there was 2,000 people in the room, and I was speaking about this exact topic for a major retailer in the United States. And I was talking about this very topic. And one of the women stood up and said, I just want to say this because I feel like I can, because we've opened up this conversation. She's like, I'm a Dominican American. And do you know how often I walk into a room and people ask me my opinions on an African American's user experience and what she needs, because people just assume because I'm not white that I'm African American? She's like, I don't know. I came from an island, right? I speak Spanish. My family, I'm a Latina. That is totally different than an African American experience, and yet this is happening internally. So if we can't solve that problem, that very, very, very important problem, just imagine how badly we're doing for our customers, because we're putting them in these big, big groups, okay? And those groups are not helpful. So I said to these retailers, I said, you have to think about gender and size and fit and color of skin all in one sort of big picture. You can't have a plus size corner and a gender-free zone and a prints for Latina women, right? That doesn't work. That's not how people want to shop. So either you have to focus on that area, or you have to think a lot more inclusively about the experience you're providing and the fact that everybody who's walking into that door comes in with their own personal story. Sustainability and luxury, are they in contrast together, or can they work together? So I'm going to say yes and no. I think fashion, as I said earlier, is not a sustainable industry in general. That said, I think if we go back to the traditional values of luxury, meaning not Balenciaga's tennis shoes that every single person owns, but if we're talking about something that's handmade, maybe haute couture, then yeah, I do think that's a lot more sustainable. Not only is it local, not only do we know the person who made it, and that person's hopefully getting paid a fair wage to create that Chanel dress. The reality is there's only one of them. And so we're not talking about mass production anymore. We're only creating something that one person wanted. My hope is that with technology, we can start to be a little bit more haute couture again by meeting people more one-on-one through personalization using technology, and being able to kind of streamline some of these processes. But just because I'm saying yes and no, I think that's part of the reason why we still have to have these conversations. It's not so simple. Last question. Okay, let's see. Do you think that retailers are using values like sustainability for marketing, and people are getting tired of it? And also, what do you think is going to happen with personal shopping and social media, celebrities and things like that? So I'll answer those both in together. Yes, I don't think people are sick of sustainability. I think if anything, people are a lot more interested than ever before, for obvious reasons, because I think due to the internet, we now have more transparency and information, and it's not so hard to find out the facts if online. And so I think that's only going to continue. What I do think is that customers do get sick of companies that are on the bandwagon, or are trying to engage when they're not really authentically connected. I'll give you an example outside of sustainability. There are a lot of brands right now trying to do gender-free or genderless things, or they call it androgynous. It's probably not going to work. If you're not really thinking about bathrooms for trans people or dressing rooms, and you're not actually being thoughtful about that experience, it doesn't matter if you have a section that is androgynous clothing, because you're simply not being authentic to that person who's coming in to shop. And I think the same thing goes for sustainability. In terms of image and things like that, no, I think that'll continue. listen, we live in a capitalist society. We're all going to go back to spending money and making money and spending money again as soon as we can. What I do think will change is perhaps some of the values and the focus. And I don't know about you guys, but I've basically worn the same thing for 3 weeks. I've been in quarantine for 3.5 weeks. And I have to, I've realized I have a lot of clothes that I haven't worn in a month. And I'm definitely rethinking, do I need these things? So,
Yeah, same here.
yeah, I think we're all going through that. So I think, if anything, we're all hopefully reevaluating what our values are and where we want to spend our money. I've worked in the industry for a very long time, and what I can tell you is the longer I've worked in the industry, the less I spend on clothes.
No, same here. You
Yeah.
become a little, I don't know, cynical, I guess.
Exactly. And I'm looking for a lot more for experience and for, really unique things. So I'm going to end it there, and I'm going to give you just 2 things here, just how you guys can connect with me. And then I'm going to turn the time to Leonore. So as she mentioned, I have an agency called Fashion Consort. We work a lot with branding, retailing, especially e-commerce. But we've done a lot of pivot lately in terms of developing educational tools and resources. What I'm really proud of is the Fashion Revolution podcast that I actually produced. I came up with the idea a week and a half ago, and we're now producing it for Parsons School of Design around retailing. It's actually available now, just not officially, into the world that are working in retail. I'd recommend that. That's being hosted by my colleague Christopher Lacey. Fashion Consort News Bites is sort of a perspective on some of the news. You're welcome to tune into that. And then we have a new one coming in the fall. And if you are interested in getting in touch with me, I would love to hear from you. So those are my handles and ways to get in touch. I will tell you that we just launched yesterday the Retail Revolution podcast website. So it's retailrevolutionpodcast.com. We've also just launched yesterday the Instagram account for that. So it's Retail Revolution Podcast. And again, I think these are really good resources, especially while we're sitting at home. We ask a lot of questions of these executives about what can you do in this time to plan for the short term of retail, because we're all very worried about what's going to happen. So I look forward to interacting with any of you. You're welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn, follow me, and stay in contact. I hope this was helpful.
This was amazing. Thank you so much, Joshua, again, for doing this. And that was super interesting. I mean, for me, I took away really, I think 3 keys from this. People want personalization, experience, and community. I think those are some of the things that people really want right now. But I'm gonna go into my presentation now. I just wanted to tell you guys about, because we're doing this a lot. We're from ISEM Fashion Business School. Let me just go ahead and put up my presentation. All right, so here we are. We are ISEM Fashion Business School. We're part of the University of Navarra. And thank you again, Joshua, for doing this. Joshua is also one of our professors, as well as at Parsons. And he's one of our speakers at the New York program, which I will briefly talk about. Anyway, thank you for attending the webinar. My name is Leonore Silva. I am the Director of International Relations at ISEM. So just to go and explain our school a little bit, we're part of the University of Navarra, which is a very prestigious university in Europe and all over the world, Latin America mostly. And ISEM is actually the first business school in Spain specialized in fashion, and we've been open since 2001. So here we go. So what do we do? What we do is we train professionals with business and leadership skills to work in the fashion industry. Our mission is to professionalize the sector And we do it with a highly specialized program offer with sector-specific training, and we generate excellent academic content. And we have a lot of support from fashion companies. We have an extensive network of international academic partnerships as well. So with schools like FIT and ISEM in Paris. We have also collaborations with former students. We have a lot of alumni, over 1,200 alumni that are working in big companies in the industry. So they really support us in different ways. We have guest lecturers from companies in our network. We have they come and recruit our students. So we have really good relationships with them. So why is ISEM a unique fashion business school? Mostly because we were born directly from business, not from fashion design. So there's a lot of design schools out there that started with design as their main thing, and then they started offering fashion business courses or business courses or programs. And we've always been focused on the business side of fashion. Also, we're located in Spain, which is a country where management, creativity, and retail are well known in the fashion industry. You know, Spain is a country of reference in the fast fashion business models. So these are the models that are capable of placing new collections almost every week in the stores. So some examples of fast fashion companies are Inditex, you know, the Zara group, so Zara, Massimo Dutti, Pull&Bear, Stradivarius. There's also Tendam Group, which owns Corte Fiel, Springfield, Women's Secret, Pedro del Hierro, Mango, there's Desigual. So Spain is also a leading country in bridal, you know, with Pronovia, Rosa Clara, and children's fashion with Goco, Majoral. I mean, there's so many, you name it. We're also big producers of footwear and leather products. So a lot of big companies produce their leather goods in Spain. So we think that's a really good thing that we're located in Spain, because we're able to visit these companies, have guest lecturers from them. A lot of our students go and work there eventually. We also do seminars. So each week we have exclusive fashion seminars that help our students gain more knowledge about the industry's main sectors. And our programs are meant to be very practical for real life application. So they don't just stay like theoretical, like they're actually really applicable to real life. So you can apply that knowledge to your current job or your future jobs. And we work hand in hand with ISEM Business School, which is a really prestigious and one of the top rated business schools in the world. Also, each student has a personal mentor who guides them throughout the course. So that's it's a very personalized experience. We believe in personalized education. And it's so what is our academic offer? We have two main programs. Our main program really is our biggest program is called the FBA. It's the Executive Master in Fashion Business Administration. And what's really important about this program is that it's the only official executive fashion MBA in Spain. So there's a lot of schools that offer master programs or degrees, but ours is the only official one, you know, like by the government and everything. So it's very important that it's the only one in Spain. It's an executive format, so it's 10 months. It runs September through June, Fridays and Saturdays, so that you can work during the week. And it's 100% in English. So this program used to be in Spanish, but we made it 100% English so that it can be more international. We think that really enriches people's experience in education. And we have exchange programs with Bocconi University in Milan and IFM, or Institut Français de la Mode, in Paris. So that's a great experience that the students get to enjoy. They go and visit Milan and Paris and learn about the fashion industry in Italy and France. So the MBA classes are taught by professors from the University of Navarra, ISEM Business School, and we have visiting professors like Joshua, who comes from Parsons, and also professionals from the industry. So from those companies that support us and our alumni, they come in and teach sometimes. And the methodology for this program is the case method, which is really interesting because they get to read a real life case of something that happened, and they discuss it with the professor and with their other students, and it's a great way of learning. They also do consultancy projects for companies. They have to do a business plan project, and there's a lot of teamwork involved. And we also do company visits. So, for example, they'll visit the Inditex headquarters in Arteixo, and it's amazing to see. And Joshua was actually there a couple of years ago, so it's great. You get to do a lot of company visits and learn how they work. So our students, 90% or more of our alumni are actually working in the fashion industry when they graduate. So actually we have a 98% of student employment in the industry. So once you graduate this program, you're probably going to get recruited by a good company. So the student profile for the FBA, or our Executive Master in Fashion Business Administration, is their average age is 26 to 27. Most have a bachelor's degree. No, actually, sorry, you have to have a bachelor's degree, and you have to be able to speak in English because it's 100% in English. You have to have had some previous professional experience, but it doesn't have to be in fashion. And you have to have, of course, an interest in the business side of fashion. So businesses really recognize our students as quality candidates for job positions due to their high level of education. And so during the course of the year, we'll have recruiting sessions by these companies. So they'll come in and they'll do different activities with the students. So they'll interview them, they'll do recruiting sessions, and then they'll eventually decide if they want to hire them, the potential talent. So that's our FBA. We also have a PADEM program. It's an intensive management training program for the fashion sector. So it's really to gain better skills for leadership with a 360-degree view of the fashion industry and the business side of it. So it's 4 months, and it runs usually March to June. Of course, now with the COVID-19, we've had to postpone this program, but it's usually on Fridays. This one is in Spanish, and we offer these students the opportunity to also do the New York program as well for a reduced rate. So we also have many other specialized programs, which I will quickly talk about. So we have the Fashion Digital Strategy program, which is 2 weeks in Madrid. There's the Right Product program, which we're rethinking right now, but it's a program basically to think about the right way of managing product, focused on materials, health, safety, and sustainability, and the traceability of each garment. We have the summer program for people that are interested in the fashion industry, but they don't know if they want to focus on that yet. It's kind of an introduction to the fashion industry. And then we also have our international programs, which are Miami and New York. So our Miami program we launched it last year. It's amazing. It's called Fashion Entrepreneurship 101. And it's a 2-week, we say it's a boot camp for fashion entrepreneurs or designer entrepreneurs, for people who want to launch a brand or grow their brand. So they get to work on their business plan with experts from the industry and professors from ISEM. And they get to learn also how to pitch their brand to buyers, investors, and editors. It's a really great program, and it's in Miami. The next one will be in January 2021, and it'll be in Babson College in Brickell. We also have our New York program, which is called Fashion Business IQ, an insight into the industry. This is a 1-week intensive program. The idea is to gain a 360-degree view of the industry in the US and how people do business there. And it's a great opportunity to do a lot of networking with important players in the industry, and just to be inspired and look at what are the latest trends, what's happening. So people like Joshua are speakers on this program every year. This next edition will be the 7th year that we do this. It's in July. So we have professionals from the industry. So people from Carolina Herrera, Oscar de la Renta, Estee Lauder. We've had the president of Jimmy Choo come in and speak before. We had the president of Primark also. So you get a lot of different companies and different people that talk about their experience from different points of view, as well as professors from prestigious universities in the US. So NYU Stern, Parsons, FIT, Wharton. It's a great program. So ISEM also has a lot of great international alliances, and these are just some of the universities that we work with constantly. And some of our other activities are, we have an entrepreneur club called The Hive for emerging companies in Spain. We have a fashion startup accelerator for fashion technology companies called Atelier. We have consulting services. We do a lot of cultural and public events. There's industry meetings. We also focus a lot on research. And these are just some of the companies that are working with ISEM a lot. We have, good relationships with all of them, with Inditex, Mango, Tenam, Bimba, LVMH. And this is our brand new campus in Madrid. So feel free to visit anytime you want. You can always contact us. This is our contact information. Connect with us on Instagram. That's the handle at ISEM FBS or ISEM Fashion Business School. We're doing a lot of online activity right now, also due to the coronavirus situation. So feel free to sign up for our newsletter or write to us. Our admissions department's emails are there. You can write directly to Mercedes, or if you want, to me. We can connect. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to connect with you. And thank you so much for joining this webinar today. And as I said before, we are, we have a question. The next edition, yes, of Miami is going to be in January. So thank you so much for connecting, and we'll be happy to meet you in Madrid if you come visit our campus, or if you want to write to our email or connect with us on Instagram. Thank you, everyone, and we will be sending the recording of the webinar to your inbox soon, and the presentations. So thank you. Bye.